Hello everybody and welcome to a very special 2-for-1 game review and demo video for Pick Your Poison and Search History. Before I get started, if you haven't done so already, please take a look at all my various social media pages as well as my Patreon page. On all of those you'll be able to interact with myself and my channel in a whole lot of really fun ways. So both of these games come to us courtesy of Player 10 Games. Their catalog is primarily party games and they were nice enough to send me these two so that I can do my thing and tell you guys all about them. Effectively, they are both party games, like I mentioned before, which means that we're talking about a lot of players and a very socially interactive format for each of them. They are a little bit different in terms of the player count and all that kind of stuff. So Pick Your Poison plays anywhere from 3 to 16 people, and then Search History is essentially rated as just being 4 or more. Beyond that, you're looking at about a half hour to an hour to play either one of them. They both involve judges, as we see with a lot of these types of party games, but with that we are going to dive right into exactly what these games are similar to. As far as similarities are concerned, there are 3 major ones that I wanted to mention, one each for the individual games and then one that's sort of similar for both. For Pick Your Poison, this is effectively Would You Rather. That's literally what you're doing. You have card A and card B, and then everybody is voting on which one they would rather do. And the point distribution is similar to that of Dixit, where if the judge has bad cards and effectively everybody picks the same one, they lose points, and then if there's a split decision, judge gets more points, and things like that. That's sort of where the strategic aspect comes into play. As for Search History, this is effectively Balderdash, where you're trying to fill in the blank, or rather autocomplete, since this is really a technology-based thing. For Search History, you have search results from an unnamed search engine that may or may not start with a G, and effectively you have an initial prompt. And the idea is that the players will write down what they think the rest of the prompt is, or what the funniest thing is, and then everybody votes on what they think was the most hilarious, and whoever gets it right gets the most points type of thing. In addition to having this one, I also got a copy of the Safe Search Off, Not Safe for Work edition. Now honestly, I'm not going to be talking about this one too much except when I talk about the pros and cons of the game. I'll show a couple of them, but really not too much. Essentially, this one is made for ages 17 and up versus 10 and up for this one. So you guys know how I feel about Not Safe for Work stuff. That said, as far as both games are concerned, the big similarity is going to be things like Ka and other games like that that involve social judgment type things, because that's really what it boils down to. I mean, whether it's Apples to Apples or the Cards Against Humanity, anything along those lines, it feels very similar. You do have a social situation. Some people might be uncomfortable with it, but in the end, you've got a judge who is judging entries in a game in something that is relatively light on strategy. So with that, we're going to head over to the table to show you how both of these games function in my demo. Alright everybody, we're all set up and ready to start playing Search History and Pick Your Poison. Like I mentioned, these are pretty simple party games, so they go by really quickly and they're super easy to explain. Starting off with Search History, essentially you're just going to have a stack of cards in the middle of the table, just like this, and you're going to pick the leader by seeing whose birthday is the closest. When the leader starts, they will draw the top card, and then whatever color is at the bottom of the next card, they will read that prompt. On each of these cards, there is an initial prompt followed by a bolded statement. That initial prompt is what they read out, and then what everyone does is they'll write down what they think best completes that, just like an auto-suggest on a search engine would. So everybody writes it down, the leader also writes down the correct answer, and then surreptitiously mixes everything together and reads them out in a random order. After that, everybody will go around the table, and each individual player will select which one was their favorite. If they got the answer correct, they get 2 points. If yours is selected, even if it's not right, you get 1 point. And then if you actually get the autocomplete correct, then that means that you get 4 points. So this is a fun little quirky game, and it has stuff like, does Kanye West have a... The answer is PhD, in case you were wondering. And then my personal favorite, can you use a watermelon to... The answer is charge your phone. So you have funny, goofy little things like that. It's really cool. That said, I also got this not safe for work version, which honestly, I don't like touching with more than a 10-foot pole because you have, well, it's not safe for work. So I'm not going to say any of them aloud. But that's really all search history is. You play to however many points you want. There are a couple of rule changes that you can make. For example, the judge's choice, where when you draw the card, you can select which question you ask and not base it off of the next one. You also have the official variant where people can nominate a bonus points category, and then of course you can also look up your own personal ones. One of my favorite aspects to this game is that they actually picked sections that are reasonably going to stand the test of time. So there's not a lot of things related to like current leaders of countries and stuff like that, because obviously those are going to be over in a relatively short amount of time. Moving right into Pick Your Poison, as I mentioned, this is essentially a would you rather game. Similarly to search history, it starts off by the leader being the person whose birthday is the closest or was most recent. Everybody starts with 6 cards from the poison card deck, which is this big one right here. And then everybody also starts with an A vote, a B vote, and a double down card. So effectively the way that the game works is the leader will first pick a card from their individual hand and set it down in the poison card A. After that, everybody who's playing will submit a card for consideration to be poison card B. Essentially the judge will take all of them, mix them around, read all of them aloud, and then make their selection. Whoever card is selected gets a point, and then everybody will vote on if they would rather A or B. At any time, the players can also play their double down card, which means that they'll put their pick card face down and the double down card next to it. And then effectively any points that they receive based off of their the card that they played or the one that they chose will be doubled. If at any time you don't get any points after playing your double down card, then you actually lose this card for the rest of the game. Scoring for this is very, very simple. Essentially, if all players pick the exact same card, then that means that the judge loses points. If it is a split decision, then everybody who is in the majority gets 1 point, and then if it's a super even tie, then and you've got 50-50, then that means that the judge wins points, with the idea being that the judge is trying to make the most difficult decision, put the most difficult decision on the players that they possibly can. So in this particular game, you've got a decent number of relatively random things, but at the same time you also have some that I'm not particularly fond of. So you have things like, give everyone in the room 10 minutes to look through everything in your bedroom, live the rest of your life without your thumbs, be allergic to sunlight, wear a bike helmet at all times, you can't cross the street without holding hands, be required to start a conversation with a stranger every time you use a public restroom. Like, it's a little bit weird and awkward, kind of embarrassing, not my exact cup of tea, but I'll talk more about that in the next little section of this video. That said, there are a few variants to Pick Your Poison as well, where if you've got an odd number of players, for example, then the judge will also use a pick card so that you can have an even number of cards being picked for the sake of seeing if you've got an even selection. You can use the ability to where if you spend 1 point, then you can sort of refresh your hand, you put all your cards at the bottom of the deck, and then you're able to draw 6 new cards so that you don't have that sort of stagnation that you see with a lot of party games like this. You can also elect to have the judge simply collect the card from the top of the deck and put it down in poison card A, and a few other things just to sort of keep things interesting and a little bit replayable. But effectively, that's it for these 2 games and how to play them. We're going to move right along into my pros and cons and general conclusions. There are a few big pros that I wanted to mention for both of these games. The first one that does apply to both of them is the reason that I wanted to try these out was because it seemed like they were putting a unique spin on an old idea. And honestly, they both do that reasonably well. Pick Your Poison, again, is simply Would You Rather. Search History is Balderdash, but I like the idea of having the sort of twist of autocomplete search engine type thing with Search History, and for Pick Your Poison, the idea of making it a more social experience where it's semi-randomized as to what you're going to be picking between, and again, everybody ends up laughing and having at least a reasonably good time with both of them. Second up on the pros is that these do a better job than most party games, in my opinion, at being reasonable and not over the top, awkward, and nasty. So it's something I'm going to talk about in just a little bit more, but effectively so many times party games and social games like this tend to go over the top with just wanting to embarrass the players and just be disgusting for the sake of being disgusting, and I am looking at you, Cards Against Humanity. That is all you do. Last but not least on the pros is the overall replayability that both of these have. They have a lot of cards available, and on top of that they also have some really interesting rules variants. It's nice to see especially those rule variants in party games like this, because it does mean that you can keep having at least a little bit of fun after all is said and done. Now moving right into the cons. The biggest one that I have to do, and the biggest offender, is this guy right here, Pick Your Poison, and that is what I mentioned earlier with the sort of embarrassing, disgusting, inappropriate type stuff. These are games that you really want to play with the appropriate crowd at the appropriate time. And the problem is that Pick Your Poison in particular has those kind of nasty, raunchy, disgusting would you rather aspects to it, and I just don't see the point. I do not see the fun in that. I don't like games that do that, and this is amongst them. I wasn't a fan of doing that, and so in the end it's like, can we filter out those cards? To an extent, yes, but at the same time it kind of molds the spirit of the game. And I mean, I would honestly just rather not play it in that sense. Search History, on the other hand, at least the base game, does a wonderful job of mitigating all of that. It doesn't have that same sort of raunchy, nasty aspect to it. It's meant to be fun and lighthearted and just kind of goofy. And I love it for that. It's so much fun. Just like sitting there reading the cards like, oh man, I can't believe that's how it is. It's really fun, and the autocomplete aspect is just hilarious, and we see it all the time in these unnamed search engines. That said, as I mentioned, I also received a copy of the Search History Not Safe for Work. Frankly, I barely touched it because, again, I don't like games that do this. I do not like party games that are designed solely around the idea of embarrassing their players and just doing disgusting things. It doesn't make sense. I don't like it. So, Search History base game, lots of fun, very lighthearted. Pick Your Poison, the base game for this, again, you really need the right crowd in the right situation. And it's just not for me. It's not my particular taste unless a lot of the cards are removed, but that kind of takes away the point of a lot of people's idea of would you rather. So is it good? Is it bad? It depends. These are not games that are ever really going to be in my FLGS box, simply because party games don't do very well in public places. However, Search History for sure at least will have a place at my home table as evening is winding down. We don't want to play anything super crazy and ridiculously out there, and that'll take a really long time. Pick Your Poison maybe can hit the table on occasion, but it will not be very common for me personally, just because I don't like it, and most of the people that I play with do not like that style of game either. But that said, both games, they're fun in their own right. If these are the types of games that you enjoy, then by all means do check out Player 10 Games. All of their catalog, they've got similar games to this. They have games that are more similar to Search History, more similar to Pick Your Poison in the context of what types of cards they get. But all of their games, very party-oriented, very lighthearted in terms of the strategic aspect and all that kind of stuff. Just a matter of what type of game do you want to play. So thank you so much for watching. I hope that you enjoyed this very special 2-for-1 review and gameplay demo video. As always, let me know any and all thoughts that you guys have in the comments below, because you know I love to hear from you. But that said, thank you so very much for watching, and I will see you next time.